Epictetus, quotes that transform lives, Stoicism. Sometimes all it takes is a single sentence. One single sentence, spoken at the exact right moment, can pierce through layers no one else has ever managed to touch. When everything seems to collapse, when the chest tightens inexplicably, when the world becomes a silently cruel place. A sentence can find you, not to solve things, but to remind you. To remind you that even in chaos, there's a place within you where lucidity still breathes. This was the case for Epictetus. His life wasn't easy. He was enslaved. He was wounded. Everything was denied to him, except the freedom to think. And it was in this invisible freedom, inaccessible to any other human being, that he built his strength. Not the strength of the body, but the strength of a soul that chooses, even when wounded, to remain standing. When you read Epictetus, it doesn't just feel like philosophy, it feels like a letter. A letter written by someone who has felt what you feel, but who refused to sink. He doesn't shout. He doesn't promise magical solutions, but he points. He points to where it hurts and to where healing can still exist. Seneca used to say that nothing is more powerful than a well-trained mind. And Epictetus made this his path. He trains us, word by word, to remember that we are not what happens to us. We are what we do with what happens to us. And that small difference changes everything. Because when we feel we've lost control of life, when everything seems disordered and unfair, Epictetus gives us back the essential, the power of choice, the power to respond, the power not to abandon ourselves even when everything around us does. And that's what this video brings. Not formulas, not promises, but encounters with phrases that don't just want to be quoted, they want to be lived. Because deep down, there are moments when the right phrase, spoken in the right silence, can restore the wholeness we thought we had lost. 1. It is not things that disturb us, but our interpretation of their significance. The mind is a broken mirror. It reflects everything in fragments, interpretations, assumptions. We don't always see what is, we see what we believe to be. And in this silent confusion between fact and idea, much of our anguish is born. Epictetus isn't saying that pain doesn't exist. He's saying that it begins to transform when we recognize how much we're mixing reality with projection. You don't suffer because someone delayed a message. You suffer because you judge that delay as disrespect. You don't feel insufficient for not being chosen. You feel that way because you interpreted the other's silence as a personal rejection. Suffering isn't born from facts. It's born from the story we tell about the facts. And when that story is repeated unconsciously, it becomes truth. A heavy, rigid truth that shapes your gestures, your reactions, your sleepless nights. Epictetus invites us to a separation that seems simple, but is profoundly transformative. Distinguish what happened from the idea we made about what happened. This space between the real and the imagined is where freedom resides. It's where we can breathe, slow down, question. Peace isn't born from controlling the world. It's born from reinterpreting with honesty, from looking at what seems so obvious, so offensive, so cruel, and asking, is this really about me? Or is it just another distorted reflection of what I already carry within? When you start practicing this distinction, something changes. You stop being a hostage to what you feel and become responsible for what you feed within yourself. And at that point, chaos begins to give way to lucidity. Not because the world has changed, but because you've learned not to believe everything your mind tells you. 2. If someone provokes you, know that your mind was already vulnerable. Anger rarely originates from others. It originates within us. And the other person merely touches unknowingly a raw spot that was already there. A comment cuts through you. A criticism feels too personal. what hasn't yet been healed within. Epictetus saw this with almost surgical clarity. He didn't blame the provocateurs. He looked at the place that still hurts, at the soul's blind spot, where something needs attention. If a word throws you off balance, it's not about the word, it's about the axis that is still fragile. And that is liberating. Because as long as we blame others, we remain trapped in the game of reaction. We react, explode, over-explain, but none of this strengthens us. It only feeds the cycle. It only reinforces the idea that control is always in the hands of those who affect us. Epictetus offers us another direction. He proposes that we use every provocation as a mirror. If it hurts so much, it's because there's a wound there. And instead of hiding the pain, he invites us to look with honesty, to embrace what hasn't yet been resolved, to see the insult not as an offense, but as a signal. It's not about accepting abuse, but about not surrendering your own center to every cutting remark. It's a silent training, listening without absorbing, feeling without getting lost, taking a deep breath and telling yourself, this touched something within me, and it's that something that needs to be looked at. Because in the end, those who are at peace are not easily shaken. Those who know themselves do not bow to noise, and those who practice Stoic presence. Learn that no insult has more power than the integrity of a mind that no longer needs to prove anything to anyone. 3. Freedom is wishing things happen as they do. The greatest prison isn't physical, it's mental. It's expecting the world to follow our invisible script, for people to act as we like, for life to bend to our expectations. And when that doesn't happen, because it rarely does, we rebel, we suffer. Fight against what is, as if it were possible, to force the river to flow backward. Epictetus points to a path that seems radical. He doesn't just say to accept what happens. He goes further. He says that true freedom begins when you wish that things happen exactly as they do. Not because everything is good, but because everything is inevitable. And fighting against the inevitable is to slowly sicken oneself. It's hard to grasp this immediately. It sounds like resignation. It sounds like giving up, but it isn't. It's clarity. Clarity that resisting reality doesn't change reality. It only destroys your peace. Clarity that when you stop fighting the current, you can finally begin to swim with it. It doesn't mean you approve of what hurts. It means you choose to learn from what hurts. That you no longer get stuck in why did this happen, but delve into what did this come to show me. And this shift in focus changes everything. Because it takes you out of the victim role and places you at the center of your own journey. There's a subtle relief in this movement, a relief that doesn't come from passivity, but from active acceptance, from the awareness that controlling everything is an illusion. And that true strength lies in flowing with what is, without losing sight of who you've chosen to be. When you wish life to be as it is, you stop negotiating with the impossible, and you begin to dialogue with the real. You start to find meaning in what was once just pain. And this freedom, silent, firm, immense, depends on nothing more than a new perspective on what has always been there. 4. Seek not to be admired, but to be integral. At some point in life, almost everyone learns that being admired is a way to feel accepted. So we start molding gestures, calibrating words, hiding pains, and exaggerating virtues. All this with a single, hidden desire to be recognized, to be seen favorably, to be someone pleasing, But Epictetus invites us to an opposite movement. He reminds us that admiration is fragile, it's external. It depends on the gaze of others. Integrity, on the other hand, is silent and internal. It doesn't need to be shown. It doesn't bend to another's taste. It doesn't adapt to applause. It remains even when no one is looking. How many times have you lost yourself trying to be what others expected of you? How many times have you stifled your own truth to fit a more comfortable image? Admiration, when sought as validation, becomes a prison, a golden trap where you are loved, but for something that isn't real. Stoic dignity lies precisely in remaining whole, even under contempt, even in silence, even when no one celebrates, because true nobility doesn't need witnesses. It's a commitment to what you know is right, even if it hurts, even if it costs, even if it doesn't shine. Epictetus doesn't propose that you be indifferent. He proposes that you be true, that you trade the vice of recognition for the practice of consistency, that you choose night after night to sleep in peace with your own conscience, even if the world never notices the silent effort it demands. A simple, intimate gesture that can remind you of this is, before bed, ask yourself, where was I integral today? Even if no one noticed. And right is one who leaves traces for themselves. Because when life seems to crumble outside, these answers will be sheltered. And you'll remember that the deepest value doesn't need to be applauded. It just needs to be lived. 5. Man is not disturbed by things, but by the view he takes of them. There are days when it feels like everything conspires against you. A setback, a silence, an unexpected rejection, and suddenly the mind stirs, the heart races, the body goes on alert. But if you stop just for a moment, you might realize what hurts isn't what happened, it's what you believed it meant. Epictetus repeats this idea more than once, not because it's simple, but because it's essential. Repetition for him wasn't redundancy, it was practice. It was cleansing the mind. It was a way to recalibrate one's perspective, because the mind, without training, distorts, amplifies, creates monsters where there were only shadows. Imagine a locked door. The door itself doesn't cause suffering. What hurts is the expectation that it should be open, the belief that you had the right to pass through, the anger at someone for closing it, the anguish of feeling trapped. But if you look again, you'll see just a door. The rest is an idea. This doesn't make the pain less legitimate, but it makes it possible to understand that much of what we carry is created, maintained, and fed from within. These are the stories we tell about others, about ourselves, about what should have been, stories that become emotional prisons. Epictetus proposes a practice, rewriting these ideas, observing thoughts with the same attention we listen to a sad song, with respect, but also with distance, to perceive what is noise and what is true. When you understand that disturbance resides in the idea, not in the thing itself, a gap, a light pierces through what seemed solid, and in that light the possibility of starting anew arises with more lucidity, with more compassion, with more room to breathe. Because in the end, it's not the world that needs to change. It's how the world settles within you, the inner silence that remains after the mind calm. After so much internal agitation, after so many ideas echoing like thunder in the chest, something remains. A silence, but not the silence of emptiness, the silence of presence, of the mind that has stopped racing, of the soul that has stopped resisting. Seneca used to say that the great decisions of the soul are born in silence, not in the noise of emotion. And when you allow yourself to delve into Epictetus's words, something within you begins to align with this truth. You stop seeking externally what can only be cultivated internally. You stop begging for control, recognition, predictability, and you begin to touch a more subtle freedom, the freedom to be at peace, even when the world is not. Epictetus doesn't invite us to avoid pain. He doesn't promise comfort. What he offers is firmness. It is the wisdom of one who has seen the bottom of the well, but refused to be defined by it, of one who lost everything that can be lost, except their own lucidity, of one who was wounded, humiliated, silenced, but still chose to think clearly, to choose with consciousness, to live with integrity. Stoic transformation is like that. It doesn't come from a grand revelation. It comes from the silent habit of returning to oneself, of repeating the same phrases until they cease to be ideas and become solid ground, until they cease to be advice and become a backbone. You can imagine Epictetus as a rock in the middle of a storm, immovable, not out of hardness, but out of wisdom. The storm comes, the water rises, the wind screams, but he remained, because he learned that those who learn to stand their ground don't drown. And perhaps that's what matters most now. Not trying to be perfect, not trying to always be right, but learning to remain in oneself with lucidity, with dignity, with silence. Because when the mind calms, the essential finally appears, and the essential, almost always, what you already carry, but hadn't yet heard.